Okay, so welcome back from spring break. I hope you had a wonderful one that was relaxing and made you all rejuvenated for the last 6 weeks of class. There's not a lot of time left. There'll be 12 classes left if I did my math correctly. That should instill some panic in you. That's normal, right? The final is, I think, on the 18th of May, if I'm not mistaken, which is Monday. So that's when your final portfolio will be due. But we'll touch on that a little bit more. There's still a lot left to cover, and to me, this is when stuff starts to get fun because we start to assemble various pieces together. So we'll use some AutoCAD, and then we'll bring it into Illustrator and do some collage work with it. And then we'll do some SketchUp, and then we'll bring it back into Photoshop and do some collage work with it. So it starts to be a little bit more of a multi-software assemblies. Today we're going to start in your very brief introduction to AutoCAD. How many people know AutoCAD already? Okay, so you guys can just snooze through this, right? My hope being that maybe I might have a few things that you don't know about. I might be able to give you a few things that you might not know. But you never know. You might know everything, and you should be up here teaching instead of me. But if you know AutoCAD, that's great. I'm happy for you. If you don't know AutoCAD, AutoCAD is kind of one of the most important software tools that's in your tool belt. It is not possible for me to give you a complete overview of AutoCAD in 2 weeks. But at the same time, we're going to do our very best to give you a bunch of AutoCAD skills so that you can move on in say, 121 and draw out your Calder Museum trusses and be able to laser cut them and that sort of thing. So we're really trying to give you a bare minimum set of tools that can get you somewhere in the world of architectural design. And so AutoCAD's kind of the default application for that. I would encourage each and every one of you to take an AutoCAD class. It's very, very worth your time. It's kind of a different animal, and spending a whole semester trying to learn it will benefit you down the road. If you don't learn AutoCAD in one of the AutoCAD classes, at least take 136, which is Rhino. Rhino works remarkably similar to AutoCAD, so you will know a lot of the same stuff, and you'll be able to translate it into AutoCAD. AutoCAD just does a few things a little bit better than even Rhino does, even though I'm a big fan of Rhino. Right? So today we're going to start kind of in the very basics of AutoCAD. I'm going to walk you through kind of how the software works, what it looks like, and then we'll start doing some basic lines. We'll talk about coordinate systems and that sort of thing. We, on these computers, have both AutoCAD 2014 and 2015 installed. I'm going to try 2015. It doesn't really matter to me which version you use. If you want to use 2014, that's fine. When the little startup icon shows up here, we want to use imperial, feet, and inches as opposed to metric. Everything we tend to do is going to be in feet and inches. And so I'll go ahead and pick that as it comes along. If it doesn't ask you, you can still specify. No, I don't want to join any programs here. Maybe. If it doesn't specify or ask you what units you want to be in, you can type in the keyboard units, and when you do that, it will bring up the drawing units, in which case you can change. And it looks like it didn't actually specify that it should be architectural, so it's good that I'm doing it anyway. When I type units, it's also step part 1. It's the very first thing I ask you to do. We're going to change the type to architectural, and then below it you see something called precision. And this is for those of you that have never worked in AutoCAD before. AutoCAD is a program that you actually, instead of like Illustrator where you draw kind of arbitrary, AutoCAD, everything is full size. So when you draw a wall and it's 10 feet long, you actually specify that this wall is 10 feet long. So everything, there's no scaling in your head, there's nothing like that. We'll deal with how do you scale it and get prints out of it and that sort of thing. But everything you're drawing in what's called model space is actually full size. And so when it comes to precision, I think AutoCAD can be accurate to 16 decimal places or something, which is far, far smaller than 1/128th of an inch in terms of accuracy. The default is at a 1/16th of an inch, unless you're modeling something that's like really small, like if I was modeling a coffee cup or something like that. The precision really doesn't need to be finer than a 1/16 of an inch. If you're drawing out a house, a 1/16 is plenty in terms of precision. So we'll leave that as its default. Angles, I prefer decimal degrees. Makes more sense to me. Something on a 45-degree line, that works. And the rest of this is just fine as its default. So I'll go ahead and say OK when that's done. And I'm going to turn off, for right now, something called dynamic input. And of course, I should have opened 2014 because they moved stuff around in 2015, and now I'm not going to be able to see it. It's right there. It looks like a little plus sign with a rectangle. I'll draw it for you on the board. It's a little button at the very bottom of the screen that has like a plus sign. Let me copy it right. Looks like that. You guys see that at the bottom? I'm going to ask you for right now to turn that off, so it will not be highlighted in blue anymore. This is something called dynamic input. I will explain what it is and what it does, but for right now, for the clarity of what I'm teaching you, I want you to turn it off, and then we'll turn it back on later, because I really want you to understand a few things about how AutoCAD works. Okay? So in the world of AutoCAD, AutoCAD is a mathematical program. It's vector-based, which basically means that if you have a line, right, it can be defined mathematically for what it is. You guys remember back to the world of, like, it's probably like Algebra 2 or something, when you had like the XY graph and you had to like plot points, maybe a few nods of the head, right? AutoCAD works like that. You don't have to know the math, you don't have to know the formula, but it works like that in terms of it's on a coordinate system, right? There's an XY plane. If I were to calculate out where certain points were, I could do that in the world of AutoCAD. So I'm going to start with the Polyline tool. I know I should probably go through a few kind of toolbar layout things. So AutoCAD's set up a little bit differently than is traditional with the Adobe products. So it's the first time you're seeing something different. This top area here, they refer to as the ribbons. So we've got a home ribbon here. We also have an insert, an annotate, a view, right? So there's a bunch of other tools that are available there as well. Generally, you're going to stick within the home ribbon for this class. You've got your most commonly used tools right here: a line, a polyline, a circle, an arc. If you see there's a little triangle below a particular tool and you click on it, there's usually a bunch of different options for how that tool works. So in the circle example, I have a center with a radius, a center with a diameter, a 2-point, a 3-point circle, a tangent, tangent, radius circle, a tangent, tangent, tangent circle. So I've got some options in terms of how I would create a circle. Okay? So just be aware that if there's that little triangle, that's generally a sign that there's more tools available underneath that particular tool. So and then we have a few smaller ones like the rectangle and that. We move to this section, which is called Modify, and it contains the most commonly used modifying tools, like Move or Rotate or Mirror, right? Those kinds of tools. Trim is something we'll use today as well. Fillet I want to talk to you about as well. We move to the next little category here, which is called Annotation. This is when you're doing dimensions and that sort of thing. We will only cover that at the very end of this section, if at all. Okay? This next little section in the home is about layers. We won't talk about layers at all today, but we'll talk a lot more about layers on Wednesday in terms of how layers work. These are a variety of options relating to layers. Right? As we move forward here, this is inserting. If we were inserting other documents or referenced files or whatever, again, a little bit more of an advanced topic. These are object properties, which basically means what color is it, what line weight is it a dashed line, is it a solid line, those kinds of things as well. Then we come over here, and these are kind of some of the basic other tools, groups, utilities if you want to measure something, copying, pasting, that sort of thing. Okay? So this ribbon up here at the top contains the bulk of the tools that are available to you. There's obviously many more. We also have different ribbons that are a little bit more specific. So if I was talking about dimensioning, right, here on the home section, I have this tiny little box right here that says, oh, I can put text or linear dimension. If I go to the annotate, I've got a bunch more options that are relating to annotations. Okay? But again, it's not really something we're going to worry too much about. We're going to stick here. The other thing I should point out is there's this little button up here that says Drafting and Annotation. If we were doing something else in AutoCAD, we might switch the workspace to be one of the other workspaces. For right now, we're going to leave it on Drafting and Annotation. This is actually interesting. 2015 appears to be the first year that they've gotten rid of classic mode, which for those of us that learned AutoCAD a million years ago, classic mode looks more like it should. But anyway, it looks like they've gotten rid of it, so we don't have to worry about it. All right, so as we move on, the primary workspace here is what we're going to be drawing in the black. AutoCAD works a little bit different than other computer programs in that you draw on a black background with white lines. When you go to print, the lines are reversed, so everything that's white in AutoCAD will turn out black when you go to print it. It's just designed for your eyes and eye strain. So people that work in AutoCAD tend to sit at the computer and work for long periods of time. Drawing on a black background with white lines is much easier on your eyes than dealing with a white background with black lines. So it's just for that kind of a purpose. So we're going to do our primary work in here. It is the top view, technically speaking, from a 3D standpoint. We're not going to talk about 3D at all in AutoCAD. Actually, I would stay away from 3D in AutoCAD at all, ever, period, and move into Rhino instead. But it is technically available. And we're going to be in wireframe mode, and that's just showing us right there what that is. Okay. Down here at the bottom, you see this white bar that goes across. This is what's called the command line in AutoCAD. And so while you can access any one of the tools from one of these ribbons, so for example, I could click the Polyline tool and start the Polyline tool, I can also type down here a bunch of key commands that will allow me to work with AutoCAD. So the faster users in AutoCAD will use more and more command line stuff. Okay? You'll do a lot more typing than picking and choosing your tools. It takes a long time to get comfortable with command line things. For you, if you're just learning, the only thing you want to be aware of is that sometimes there are additional options about a particular command that will show up in the command line. And it's useful to just kind of keep an eye on that and see if it says anything. I will do my best to keep pointing it out as we go along and as you kind of learn it. Down at the bottom of the page here, we have a variety of other options. I already had you turn off dynamic input. We can also turn on, say, for example, a grid that would be in the background. I don't even think you can see it on the projector, but I could technically turn that on if I wanted to. We can turn on ortho mode, which means I can only draw in right angles. We can turn on a variety of other things. Let's see if we have object snap is right here. Right? And we'll talk through what kind of these mean, but we'll end up in Object Snap and using some of Object Snap down the road. So there's a variety of options that are available down here that will help you with your drawing. Okay? All right, so now we have dynamic input turned off, right? So it's white instead of blue. And I'm going to pick the Polyline tool. I could also type P-line to start a Polyline, same thing. And I'm going to go ahead and start drawing. And so when I start drawing, I could just arbitrarily click a point and start drawing, right? But instead of that, I'm going to be very specific when I start to draw this. So I'll click Polyline, and I'm going to start at a specific point. And what I want to talk through with you is that AutoCAD, because it's based on a coordinate system, right? Let's see if I can find that pen that I just dropped, right? We have, this is a horrible pen. Where did I do with that black pen? There it is. Okay. So remember I talked about, right, we're going back to the math days, right? I promise there won't be too much math. You won't have to actually do any math. I just want to use it as an explanation. So this is your standard graph, right? If you guys remember back, this was your x-axis, right? And this was your y-axis. Everything going from this point up is positive, right? Everything going from this point this direction is positive, right? If we're going this way, it would be negative. Or if we're going this way, it would be negative. Okay? So it's just important to kind of keep that in mind as we go through it. Furthermore, right, we can represent points on this graph, right, as a coordinated pair. So this point would be 0, 0. Because it's at the origin. 0 for the x, 0 for the y. Make sense so far? Kind of remember this a little bit? Right? If I had a point up here somewhere, right, I'd have it be 0 on the x, because we haven't gone anywhere, and some value, we'll call it 6, on the y. Right? Likewise, I could have a point that's over here, right, and this would be 6 on the x and 0 on the y. Kind of make sense? You guys remember this a little bit? If I had the point that was out here, it would be 6, 6. Okay? These are what are called absolute coordinates. Right? So this is absolute coordinates. Okay? And so we're going to use these to our advantage as we start to draw. So the first point I'm going to specify is point 0, 0. So I'm going to type in, and notice down here at the command line it says P-line specify start point. Right? It's going to be 0, 0. And I'll hit enter when I'm done, and it will start it at 0, 0. Notice that it has this little graph icon, the x and the y. Right? That's telling me that what the x and y plane are. Okay? Now the next point that I'm going to do, right, I want to go up 24 feet in the y direction. So I'll type 0, 24 feet. Right? And I'm going to use the little apostrophe, the single apostrophe, to designate feet. So I'll type 0, 24 feet, and I'll hit enter. And I will go up then 24 feet. Now sometimes, right, it goes beyond the scope of the page, and for whatever reason AutoCAD's not letting me zoom out far enough. So I'm just going to hit enter, and then I'll type Z for zoom, and then E for extents, which is going to zoom out a little bit more. Okay? Sorry, I don't know why it's doing that. Right? Quirky AutoCAD. I'll go back and pick the Polyline tool again, and I'm going to move it to the end of my line. Notice that that little green box appears, and it says endpoint next to it. That is what's called an object snap, and it just means that it's going to start from that point on the old object. So I'll go ahead and click on it, and I'm going to continue on where I left off. So the first coordinate that I typed was 0, 24, right? Which means that I had a line that was from 0, 0, 24 feet along the y-axis. Now I want to go over, right, 12 feet. So I'll type 12 feet, right? But if I'm looking at it in the xy plane, it's still up 24 feet. So I'll type 12 feet, 24 feet. Right? And now it creates that point. Okay? So those are absolute coordinates. So it's relative to point 0, 0 that all the rest of the points exist. Make sense so far? Okay. In AutoCAD, beyond, get rid of a few of these dots here, right? Beyond absolute coordinates, we have something that's called relative coordinates. Okay? And relative coordinates say, instead of referencing point 0, 0 as the origin, it's going to be whatever your last point was that's going to be the starting point. So if I started out here, right, and in absolute coordinates this was 0.6, 6, remember, right? If I did relative coordinates, I could specify, and the way we do this is we put the little @ sign, like the email address sign. So we say at, here I should do it outside, at, right? And then I'm going to give the coordinates. So I'm going to say, in this example, I'll say 0, -6, right? And what this is going to do is it's going to draw a line that goes down here to this point. So it's relative to this. Don't go anything in the x-axis and go -6 in the y-axis, right? So when I come back here to type, remember I start with the @ sign. So I say at 0, -6 feet, and I end up coming down 6 feet. Okay? Now I can continue with this relative coordinate. I can say at, this time it's going to be 12 feet, 0, right? And I can work my way around this particular shape. Now obviously this requires a little bit of math in your head, and there are faster ways of doing orthogonal objects. But if you were doing something that had an angle to it, right, it's a lot easier to do it with these kind of coordinates than by specifying. So anyway, I can continue on here, and I could say at 0, -12 feet, right? And then I could flip back. I could do absolute coordinates, right? So this would be 12 feet, no @ sign in this case, 12 feet, 6 feet. That would give me that point. And I could say 0, 12 feet. Oops. 12 feet, 0, sorry. And then I can come back and finish my shape. Okay? So these coordinates are designed so that you can mentally work through them if you need a specific place. Okay? AutoCAD has improved a bit, and I wanted to explain to you how these coordinate systems work before we got into dynamic input. So when dynamic input is on, however, right, it's going to take your command line and give you a few key text input boxes right by your cursor. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that dynamic input back on. Right? It's blue now. And I'm going to go ahead and draw again, and we'll draw over here this time. Actually, I'll just delete this for right now, and we'll draw again. Right? I'll start again at point 0, 0. Right? But notice that when I'm drawing, right, I get, as I'm drawing, these text boxes. Right? I can type in a value in one of these two boxes and not have to use the @ sign or any of the coordinates. Right? So it's another way of working with it. And to me, this starts to be a little bit more intuitive. Okay? So we know that I want to go 24 feet in this instance, so I can type 24 feet. Right? And it's going to go 24 feet. Let me make sure, sorry, I was off in a direction. Let me make sure I'm going straight up, and I'll type 24 feet. Right? It's going to create that line. Likewise, I can be going across here, and I can type 12 feet. So this ends up being a little bit faster. If I wanted something to go on an angle, for example, and I wanted to be locked into a particular angle, I can press the Tab key, which is going to switch from the length field into the degree field. Okay? And I could type 45, for example. And now everything that I draw is going to be locked in at that 45 degrees. Right? And I could specify a given length. So, I don't know, 10 feet. And then it would go 10 feet at that 45 degree line. Does that kind of make sense? Okay? So the key is that when you're drawing, using this dynamic input, it ends up being relatively fast. Right? So I could say 6 feet, and then we could go, I don't know, 12 feet. And 6 feet. And you can kind of just follow yourself around here. Let's go another 6 feet there. Oops, let's go 6 feet. It looks like I'm off a little bit. All right, whatever. Okay, so the point being that that dynamic input can make your shapes a lot faster to create. And so it may be worth your time to do it. I'm going to do it one more time just so I get the actual shape correctly. Oops. That's definitely not correct. There we go. If I don't specify the little foot mark, it will default into inches, and you'll get something much smaller. All right, so make sure you actually specify the foot. 12 feet, 6 feet, 3 feet. Oops, that was 12 feet. 6 feet. All right, so I have this shape drawn. The next thing that I'm going to do is I want to start creating. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm building this little, one-room house or two-room house. For lack of something better, it gives you something to work on. And what I want to do is I want to create the thickness of the walls. Okay, and the fastest way for me to do that is to use something called the offset command. And what offset does is it lets me create a line. Right, I take an existing line and I move a duplicate of it. Let me draw it right here. Right, so this is offset. Right, I have this. Right, when I do an offset, it's going to take the existing line and it's going to make another one that is a specific distance from the first one. Okay, so let's go ahead and try to do that one. So to do this, I can type offset, right, which would be O offset, and I can do it that way. It's also available in the modify little panel up here, ribbon, and it looks like, I don't know, sometimes these buttons are really hard to see, right? It looks like kind of like a cloud. Looks something like that. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and click on offset. And I'm going to look down here at the command line. Notice that it says offset. Specify offset distance, right? Or it gives me some of the options. What I want to do is specify a distance. Now, this is not by any means a technical construction class, so we're not going to talk about actual wall makeup and how thick a wall really is. We're just going to do arbitrary 6 inches. Okay? But that being said, if you take a construction class, you'll know that a wall really isn't 6 inches, but we're just going to do it. Okay? Make sense? So I'm going to go ahead and type 6 inches as my distance. All right. Then it's going to say select objects to offset. So I want to select my object here. And I can specify whether I want it to be on the inside or on the outside. Okay? So the original object is highlighted in this kind of bluish color. And then I can specify I want it inside or I want it outside. So in this case, I'm going to specify inside. So I click on the inside of my shape. And it now creates a duplicate of this set of lines. You may not have a completely closed polyline. You may have 2 separate pieces. That's fine. Just do the offset twice. Okay? Doesn't really make any difference. Okay? So I now have, right? Yeah, you can join. We haven't got to join. I know. Okay, so I now have my basic walls set up. But what I want to do is I want to put the door opening, right, on the top. Right? So if I turn it this way, I'm kind of following along with this. Okay? I want to put that door opening in the center of this top section. So I'm going to scroll with my scroll wheel to zoom in on this particular piece. And then I'm going to use my Polyline tool, and I want to draw a line that's right in the middle. Okay? And so before, we saw that we got a little square at the end when I snapped to the end point. Right? Midpoint is a little triangle. And so you see I get that little green triangle. That means it's going to be right in the center of this line. Okay? You can specify what object snaps are on by coming down here to the object snap icon, which is a square with a little dot in one corner. And there's a little flyout menu, a little tiny triangle, that can choose which object snaps are on. So right now I have endpoint, which means any end of a line it will snap to. Midpoint, any center of a line it will snap to. And center of a circle, right, it'll snap to that. There are a lot of other options that are out there. Personally, the one that I also always leave on is perpendicular. So I'll go ahead and turn that on. You see it gets a little check mark next to it when you turn on perpendicular. So I have endpoint, midpoint, center, and perpendicular on. Okay? And now I'm going to draw a line that goes from the center of this line to the center of that line. All right? So I have a line there to there. Okay? Now I'm going to use offset once again. So we'll come here. And I'm going to offset this line by a specific distance. Okay? So in this case, it's a 3-foot door, which would be 36 inches. Half of that would be 18 inches. So I'm going to do it by 18 inches. So I'll type 18 inches. Right? The inch mark is the quotation mark. So I'll type 18 inches. And I'm going to offset this line that way. And I'll offset this line that way. Okay? So I went both directions. Okay? Once I'm done, I'll hit Enter to finish the command. And then I can actually come in and select that original line and press the Delete key, and it goes away. Okay? So I've effectively created each side of the door. Now, unfortunately, my lines go straight through, right? And if this is actually a door opening, I need to get rid of this part of the line and this part of the line. Okay? So I'm going to use a command that's called trim to do that. All right? And trim is located up here in the Modify Tools again. You see there it is as trim. I'm going to click on trim, right? And it's going to say select object or select all. And so I want to select the objects that I'm going to trim with, or a lot of times it's faster, just hit Enter one more time and you'll select all the objects. Generally speaking, there's no harm in selecting all the objects unless you have a really big AutoCAD file with lots and lots of stuff that's overlapping. So for right now, I'll go ahead and say select all. I'll press Enter. And then it's going to let me select the pieces that I want to get rid of. So I'll click on this piece, right? And it gives you kind of a nice little preview there. grays out what's going to go away. And so I'll select those two pieces, and they both go away. Okay? When I'm done, I'll press the Enter key one more time, and I've now created that opening in the wall. Okay? These are currently now separate shapes. Right? I have an inside and an outside. I want them to join all together to become one shape. So I'm going to go ahead and select them all. Right? And this is a good time to point out how selections work in AutoCAD. If I select, starting on the left side, anything that is fully contained within my square is going to be selected. Okay? So you see that I've selected both of those lines. If I start, however, from the right side, right, anything that my square touches will be selected. So there's two different ways of selecting things in AutoCAD. And it's really important to learn that because you'll get a lot better selections if you have that understanding. Okay? Recognize that from the right to the left is going to be a green selection. From the left to the right is going to be blue. So AutoCAD's trying to teach you that there's a difference in the two selections. So I'm going to go from the right to the left, selecting all the objects, and then I'm going to join them together. And I think it's under here. I always just type join, but I'm kind of curious if I can find it. Yeah, I don't know where it is. Just type join. And these will join together into one continuous object. Okay? So I have those drawn now. Now we're going to continue drawing with more of these shapes. Right? It says it's under the modify ribbon. I don't know. We're going to continue drawing with a few more shapes. So for example, I might want to put a window in. Right? And so we'll flip this over so I can see where this window would be. Right? I have it 1 foot from the door. Right? So I want to go over 1 foot. Right? So I'll type 1 foot. Oops. And I'm so used to my Rhino. Be annoying. Sorry. They took away one of my options. I'll have to find it. Anyway, I want to start this next window. So let me go ahead and just use this line as a reference. So I'll go right here. And let me go ahead and move it. There. And then I'll move this line over a foot. 1 foot. There. And then I'm going to offset again. And that window was 2 feet. So let me offset. And we'll type distance of 2 feet. And so you see I'm starting to build that window. I'll do a line from midpoint to midpoint to create that little bit of a window. If I wanted the same window on the opposite side, right, I could take and select, remember, from the left to the right to select everything. And then I could mirror it. Right? Now I can't mirror from the center here because there is no center to that doorway, but I can mirror from the center down here. So I'll use mirror from the center. I'll hit enter, and you can see that I have them on both sides. Right? If I wanted these to show up down at the bottom, right, I can do the same mirror. There it is. We can mirror it this way. I can have the first window there. So you can see how once you start to draw, it can be very quick to fill in the rest. Okay? A few other things that I'll put in just as food for thought, kind of more advanced topics that you may want to play around with. In AutoCAD, you have the ability to create what's called a fillet. So if I had two lines that were separate like this, okay, and I wanted these to come together in either a chamfer or a fillet, right, I can use one of those two commands to create this. A fillet is going to give us a rounded corner. So if I type fillet, right, it's going to say, what radius do you want? So there's a radius. And I want it to be, say, 1 foot. And when I click on the first line and then the second line, you'll see that it'll connect them together with a rounded corner. Right? Chamfer works the same way. If I type chamfer, I can specify distance. So let's say I wanted it to be 1 foot and 1 foot. Instead of being rounded, it's going to be angled. So you can see I created the angle instead of the round. Right. The other thing that's very useful, and this may be for those of you that are more experienced in AutoCAD, one of the fastest ways to get two lines to connect together is to do a fillet with a radius of 0. Is when you have two lines in space, you can get those to come together into a nice corner very quickly. I use that frequently when I'm working. So you can just set the radius to be 0, and you get a 90-degree corner. So what I want you to do is experiment, play around, and try to draw this. Right? There are some shapes in here that are a little bit more challenging, like the arcs. Right? There's no right and wrong answer. If you feel very comfortable in AutoCAD and you want to draw something different than this or change the floor plan, by all means, go ahead. In terms of the trajectory of where we're going, you will start drawing your own building soon. You're going to do a simple cabin drawing. We'll do a floor plan and we'll do an elevation of it. That will be your assignment 105. Right? Then you will take that AutoCAD drawing and you'll bring it into SketchUp and model it in 3D. So we're kind of going to use the same kind of work. So start thinking about what your cabin might be looking like and that sort of thing over the next couple days. Okay, and I'll give you the official handout on Wednesday. Yeah. Maybe. I'll have to see it. Okay, you can show it to me. Are there any questions before I turn you loose? No, I know AutoCAD is a lot to take in, but I'm also confident that you guys can pick it up pretty quickly.